Suppose you're walking down the street and you decide to make a test. You want to understand what will happen if you ask a certain question to everyone you meet. This can't happen in reality, but just suppose for a little bit. So you walk down the street, and every person you meet, you ask them the same question. And the question is as follows. Sir or madam, would you rather look right or be right? Would you rather look right or be right? Now, you know what they're going to say, don't you? What is going to happen is that everyone is going to lie to you. Everyone is going to tell you that they would rather be a right person than simply appear to be one. Now, look at that very carefully, their answer. And if you're not careful, you will fall into the trap of thinking that deep down inside, everyone knows the difference between right and wrong. Deep down inside, you might think that that person really understands that he should be right instead of appearing right on the outside. But in his mind and in her mind, when you say, would you rather be right or look right, they will say, I'd rather be right. The deception is so deep, it could very easily fool you as it's already fooled them. When a person says, I'd rather be right, not only is he playing for exterior right impressions, like to impress you that he's a right person who does the things that are true in this life, but something else is happening. And you look at it now. When that man or woman says, of course, I would rather be right, let's look under a microscope and see what he's really saying. What he is really saying, of course, is that I would rather be right according to my own ideas of what it means to be right. He doesn't know what rightness is. He knows what rightness is for him. And rightness for him is wrongness. Look, everything, even what his idea of what is good and true, centers around what is good and true for his ego self. Why does everybody do this? Because they know, they understand. They don't see it. They're not conscious, but there's a sensing. The devil can sense that if he was truly right, if he truly chose what is right, to do what is right instead of just look right, if he chose that, that would be the end of his self-repetitious self. Go over that one again. All of you, since you got up this morning, lived from your self-repetitious nature. That means you lived from a repetition of thoughts which kept you in place as the kind of a person you are, your habits, for example. It kept you in place as that kind of a person, which gives you a feeling of security, which is not secure at all, but it gives you a false sensing of it. So what you did this morning and all your past life is to not know what is good and true and spiritual and rightly rewarding for you. What you did was to do repetitiously what you thought would maintain, continue, repeat yourself as your images, as your desires describe you. In other words, you lived from repetitious thinking which directs what you do, where you go, your habits, whether you take a drink or don't take a drink, whether you read a book or don't read a book. You feel safe with your eyes closed, letting thoughts about yourself direct what you do, think, say, feel, react, including a mass of self-destructive emotions. Now, in that self-repetitious life, there is no self-awareness. The repetition has no awareness. But self-repetition does have a sensing of danger to its existence. Now, you, as a point of awareness, have not come into existence yet so that you can see what I've just described. You can't see that the single, now listen to this, the single greatest thing that scares you, terrifies you, and the world, every other person outside these walls, the single greatest terror of life is that thought will falter, and you understand what would happen if self-thought falters. If thought was to falter in directing you, leading you, then you feel that would be a state of non-existence for you, which you term death. You now, in your misunderstanding, think that death is the ending of your thought life, but you think that is the only you have, so you fear it. If you could see the whole process, you could understand, indeed, in fact, that death is the death of your thought life, your self-repeated life. But you would pray to God, please hasten the day when I am willing to yield fully to that death, so that what is left over is life. Are you following? Do you want to do it? So, an individual's idea of what is good is anything in the world, even a war, even maniacal emotions and thoughts. What is good? Depression. What is good to him is anything that keeps the printing press rolling, repeating the headlines over and over. I am me. And then the stories under the headlines go into details what I am. Today, I am depressed. And then tomorrow comes. Tomorrow, I won't be depressed because my thought plan is going to have something exciting to do. But at all times, the excitement is that I will be repeated in one way or another, and the world, the financial world, the sex world, the romance world, the social world, the food world, always offers you millions of opportunities to repeat yourself. And people people who are lost, who are living in darkness, never cease to be grateful for that, what the world offers them. Therefore, they know, lost people, self-repeating people, now know, quote mark, absolutely who the enemy is. They know who to fight, who to charge against, who to sneer at, who to attack. Very simple, isn't it? Anything, therefore, that threatens to slow down the printing press with a headline, I am me. Now, do you know what the one thing is that threatens that? Of course you do. The one thing is God himself. God says, you can't be a self-repeating human being and be in contact with me. There is no contact. God says, truth says, I am life. I am light. I am not you and have nothing to do with time-created self-repetition. Truth says, I am not within time, I am within eternity. And since time can't enter eternity, in order for eternity to exist in you, sir or madam, for eternity to exist, time must cease to exist. Therefore, for it to cease to exist, you must cease to exist, and you must cease to exist as someone who wants the second by second repetition of your mere descriptions, which is not you, but words and feelings and experiences by which you experience things and call that exciting experience, including depression, you call it me. Do you understand, therefore, why you are going to have to spend a lot more time considering a certain point which you haven't done till now? And that point is, you are going to have to settle for total light or total darkness, because there really isn't anything in between. There is no gray. Even if you have one bit of light in you, that one bit of light is 100% pure light, shining in the little bit of the 99% darkness inside of you. Light is always pure. You are going to have to see how you lie, for example. How you tell lies and don't know you're lying. If you could catch yourself lying, you could therefore go on and say, hey, I understand what that talk was all about on that Sunday morning. How I want only to repeat myself because I know nothing else and I'm afraid to let go, because I want to guarantee that I'll be me tomorrow by doing something evil or what I call good. And you can track your internal processes back to the supreme lie that you need to be you, the described you. That is a false need imposed upon you only because you have not studied with sincerity and earnestness with an intention of seeing that something inside of you has up to this point blocked off the light which could save you, because incredibly You have called your darkness light. You have called you real. You have called repetition eternity. You have called the time state forever. And you never see the agony of your life of trying to prove that this lie is the truth, which you'll never do. How can you ever prove that the lie is the truth? Someday, you're going to get a feeling of what spiritual relaxation and repose means. You're going to catch a small glimpse at the start. Repose means one thing. Thank heaven. It means for you to have so clearly seen through the self-imposition, the darkness, that you see, I don't have to fight for myself anymore, because in reality there's no self to fight for. I don't have to save myself, because I see that salvation means there is no one to save, no one to fight for. When you see that, all your fear of letting go will vanish. When you see that, your fear of death has to vanish. There's no choice but for it to vanish. Because you've seen the incredible mistake you've made, the blunder you've made, in which you clung to for years. You thought you had to be you. You thought you had to hang on to the hope tomorrow we're going to the picnic. I am going to a picnic. I mean it. A simple little thing like that is good enough for the false I to cling to hang on. Thank heaven I've got a picnic to go to. I am going to the picnic, therefore I am me. Thank heaven. No, don't thank heaven for that. You can thank hell for that, because that's what's tricking you. Oh, something different has to happen inside of you. And you have been given this morning the map. Everything necessary for you to accomplish what you've heard has been given to you. Now here's the problem. People don't understand, including you people, don't understand what goes on in this hall. They come into this room and they hear a talk like the one you just heard. And because in their minds they are already spiritual college graduates, they think they understand everything. They don't know that they're just little kindergarten children coming in here, and a little child. You know how mechanical a little child is, and if you lead them in the wrong way, they'll say yes to everything. You could put a astronomy book in a college astronomy book in front of a small child, and you'll say, "Do you understand this?" He'll say, nod his head, "Yes, I understand this." Now, the self-deception is yours individually. Therefore, cut yourself off from everyone. Because you cling to people who will agree with you. The little children, the little kindergarten children run around with each other to assure each other that they're college graduates. They have to huddle together, don't they? Now, you apply to this to yourself in this way. Your thoughts, your kindergarten thoughts, huddle together and they gang up against your possibility of taking what you've heard and going all the way with it. So part of your individual responsibility is to watch your mind all the time so that you can even catch 2 or 3 thugs, 2 or 3 punks right inside your own mind, 9 or 10 of them getting together and trying to keep you from breaking out of hell, which you call heaven. You can actually see a wrong thought or emotion starting and then calling on others. Take an exterior example of this and then you put it interior. Here are several people, human beings, who don't want the truth, and they hear the truth, such as they would hear here. And they all get together and argue with each other, trying to convince themselves and each other that this is not the truth. And each will contribute a thought, right? Yes, and did you see how? Yes, but he didn't mention, on and on and on. You know what this is called? The gathering of the punks. Of course they're punks. If you see them as that, do you go down to the slums, to the punk part of a city and hang out there physically? Of course you don't. You sense the danger of it. Why don't you sense the danger of what's going on inside of you? Why don't you carry I'm going to talk to all of you listening to this talk, both here and those of you listening to this cassette tape, wherever. Why don't you carry a little pocket mirror around with you sometime, right in here, this little pocket. Gentlemen can carry it here, and you ladies in your coat pocket or something. And at odd and unexpected moments, you pull it out and you look and see what kind of a human being you really are. You see how vicious you really are. See, you won't go through that shock because you are dishonest, because you're a liar. And I leave you with yourself. How is that for hell? You having to go home and living with yourself. That is what hell is. You've been given a chance to break out of hell and to start climbing toward heaven. God will help you. Truth will help you. This class will help you. Because that's what we're dedicated to doing. Climbing out of hell because we know we're in it. And you don't because you're a liar. We'll show you you're a liar, and then if you want to join us, we'll all climb out together. If that's what you want, this is the right place for you. If you want to slide down deeper into hell, you don't belong here at all. This class is for people who know there's something dreadfully wrong with them. And we also sense that truth itself is going to make it right, which it will. Your wrong thoughts create your wrong world. If you understood that simple opening statement, you would never again waste your life being concerned with the way the outer world is. But you don't want to see the full significance of that statement, because it would mean that you would have a number of things to do that you don't want to do. Among them, having self-responsibility persistent year after year for you to simply see that fact. I want you to know absolutely and finally that for you personally, there will not be a wrong world. There will not be a vicious world. There will not be a cruel world. There cannot be one unless you are it yourself. Try it again. Your mind operates in a certain incorrect, faulty way. to put it mildly. That mind then looks out at the world and it sees itself. Now you're going to have to keep about 10 thoughts together at once as I proceed in order to understand this. You say, well, Mr. Speaker, are you saying that if I look out in the world and I see a war raging out there with millions of human beings slaughtering other human beings, are you saying that that war exists only in my mind? No. It exists out there as a physical object, activity. I am asking you why you are wrongly involved in your mind and your emotions with that evil, malicious, sick war that's going out there. If you are bothered by it, if you read the newspapers and you see the reports of crime doubling and tripling, and if you fear that, you are that. What else? Is fear good or bad? It's bad and you know it. When you react with anxiety and you get self-righteous about it, we need to double the police force. We need to put those criminals where they belong, behind bars. When you say that, you are the very world that you condemn, but you don't want to see it. Oh, have you got a block, a barrier, a wall in your mind so that you refuse to see that you were the very thing you condemn, and now you can feel apart from it. You can feel righteous. You really believe that you're a good person and they're the bad people out there. It is possible for you to see the world the same way that truth sees it. Now, truth is pure, innocent, it has no delusion. It can see without reacting to what it sees, which is something that human beings cannot do. Truth is very well aware. Now we have a different word, don't we? Truth is aware of those vicious criminals out there, both wearing suits and wearing masks over their face. Truth is very much aware of what's going on in this world, of the wars, and the silent, subtle cruelty of everyone toward everyone. You don't see it. You don't believe what I'm talking about. I watched you people, and I'm talking about you in this room. I watched you this morning while doing some work. It was very easy. It's so obvious. And oh, did I see cruel people. You are cruel, you must be cruel, and desperately so, when you don't know what to do with yourself. When you have no life of your own and you're so grateful that someone will give you a little bit of work and say, here, fold these papers or stuff these envelopes. You're so grateful that someone gives you something to do. Thank you for thinking for me. I'll take it. I'll do the work. And I see you take that work and that becomes your temporary salvation for about 10 minutes. You want to see how mad you are? I've told you how to do it. And the sooner you see how mad you are, the sooner you can be on the road to sanity. You just sit down sometime at home. No cigarette, no coffee, and no snacks by your side. And you just sit there without deliberately occupying yourself with anything at all. No thoughts about what you're going to have for dinner or what's going to be on TV. And just sit there and do nothing at all. Don't even think. Just sit there and you watch, see how your terror grows, and you will see how you're dependent on a sick world to give you something to do, and guess what it will give you. Now, a doctor visiting the hospital and going around his rounds, he can see the sickness there without being a part of it, can he not? He can say something wrong with this man or with that woman. It doesn't bother him. He's not concerned with it. He's standing apart and seeing it, being physically healthy himself. And that's a pretty good example of how what we must aim to become, to see first of all, how we go into the hospital. You go out into that world and immediately you think that it's infectious and they can take you over, and they can, because there's something wrong with the way you react to the sickness you see out there. Another thing that happens when your mind is all mixed up is you see yourself the same way. Come on now. If you were to go home and write down a list of how you see yourself, your self-views, what would it be? What would you put down there? I'll tell you what you would do, and you wouldn't know why you're doing it. You're putting down all sorts of ego-protective things. Well, I'm thoughtless toward my wife now and then. You're thoughtless toward her all the time, and you don't know it, but the now and then kind of makes it look good. As if sometimes you are thoughtful of her. You write down a list of all your self-views, things that you think are good about you and things that you are bad about you, and you could spend a couple hours at it and have a nice long list, and I'll tell you what to do with it afterward. Just rip it up and toss it out, because the whole 2 hours were spent in further self-deception, in which the last thing you will ever do is to leave off labeling yourself, calling yourself something either good or bad. When you cease to call yourself anything at all, that means that your mind is no longer operating wrongly. Is no longer applying what you call sane labels to yourself. Now with a clear mind, get this, you can look out at the sick world, the sick society, in so many ways, politically, religiously. You can look out of it, look out at it, and not want one thing from it, because you no longer want to be fed by sickness. Now, a sane mind, a healthy mind, is the mind that no longer wants to be fed by bad health, right? You're healthy. What if your mind is your spirit too is healthy? That is it. That's the whole story. That's the end of it. There's nothing else to say. You have nothing to do with anybody who's wrong. How can you? You have nothing in common. You're perfectly free, and you notice it. And the reason you notice it is because you, way back there somewhere, you notice yourself. You heard some instructions about watching your facial expression. Watch how hypocritical it is. Watch how compulsive it is. Watch how you smile because you think it would make a good impression on the other person to smile. Watch how suddenly you're aware that you have a lost expression on your face, and you have that because your mind is lost. It's just going completely out of control, wandering out there somewhere, and you suddenly become aware of that. Lo and behold, as you understand what's wrong with you, you understand what's wrong with everyone else. And then you have an entirely different attitude toward it instead of one which is dominated by self-righteousness. Have you noticed how easily you pounce on other people, how critical you are? How not only how easy it is to jump on someone for their faults, but how compulsively eager you are to snap and to snarl. Why? Well, obviously, because you say, I am superior to what I'm criticizing. When you see that you're the very thing you criticize, I'll guarantee you'll never criticize again. You'll never be viciously harsh toward anyone else. You look at him and you say, oh, that's me. I know that. Look, I see that man. I used to do that. In fact, he's mild compared to what I used to do, compared to what I used to think, what I used to say to other people. There's no judger there anymore. There's no superior judge sitting up on his high court bench up there with a gavel, sitting up there and self-righteously judging the world. Oh boy, how different you feel now. You have seen through the world by seeing through yourself. And you're so glad because at one time you came to this class And you heard this fact that you must first see through yourself in order to see through others. You heard that, and it sounded okay. It sounded logical. But there are so many things given to you, so many lessons, and maybe another one was stronger to you at the moment than that one. But finally, some sad tragedy or event happened to you, and all of a sudden your mind came up out of memory, that idea that you must first see through yourself before you can see through others. And if you do that, you'll be free of both the world and yourself. And for the first time, it had deep meaning to you. First time you said to yourself, listen, here's the thought. There it is on a piece of paper that I wrote down in a note a year ago in class. This sounds good. I'm going to go all the way with this. I'm going to see if I can feel it emotionally as well as with my mind. I can read that thought on a piece of paper, but it doesn't mean anything experimentally and personally with me. I know what I'll do. I'll write it out fresh and concise on a piece of paper, and I'll put it in my pocket, and put it in my purse, whatever, as a reminder, so I won't forget, because I forget so easily. And I'll take that one thing, and I notice how I am quick to jump on people over the smallest little thing downstairs where we're having a snack or where we're working on mailings or whatever. And I'll notice how eager I am to find something wrong with someone else. And that'll connect with many other things. See, you're doing right inner work now. For example, you'll see that it connects with a thrill that you get. Oh, what a marvelous excitement to catch someone else doing something wrong. That is a moment of, quote mark, bliss for me. I am blocked out for the minute with my attention purely aimed at you. I've caught you. Not only that, but everyone else in the room caught you. And they're either laughing at you or scorning you, and you're the pure object of attention. You think you now think you know what heaven is, and God help you for that malicious thought. You think you know what heaven is. To you, heaven is to 100% block out all awareness of your own evil with the beauty of looking at the evil in everyone else out there. I don't have to see what I don't want to see. All I have to see is what I want to see, which is you. How horrible, how badly you've treated me. That is hell masquerading as heaven. Now, what kind of an electrifying shock do you think that man or woman is going to have to go through to break out of this strict, fierce insistence that this is the way it should be in order to be protected in happiness? Do you know what you're going to go through? If you don't, why don't you start experimenting so you can get a little bit of a jolt to see how what is important to you now is self-righteous accusation of other people, so that you don't have to feel your own wrongness, but simply say, that person, that world out there is wrong. Look at those criminals. They ought to lock them up, every one of them. The judges ought to send them away for life. Look how lenient those judges are. I know what I'd do if I was a judge. Look how you're going on and on and on. Why don't you shut up in order to see how you are ruining your life? There was a young man who had a father who was an industrialist, an 18-year-old boy. And his father was engaged in wide, wealthy business practices with scientific inventions. You've seen so many that we have out in the marketplace now, copying machines and computers. This father was the head of a huge organization that manufactured scientific equipment. So one day when his son became 18, the father thought he would begin to introduce his son to the world of business, because sooner or later he hoped, of course, that his son would take over and become president and keep the family company business going. So the father said, son, we're going to Go down to a convention today of businessmen and important people in the world. You'll see famous political figures there, people you've seen on television and the news. So I'm going to take you down there to get you acquainted with our business in general, just a first overall look at it. So the boy said, fine. So they get in their big car. He was a wealthy man. And they left their big wealthy home, several stories and spacious out in the country. And they drove on into town where there was a huge building owned by the father and the corporation. And as they went in, the place was packed with scientific devices. And it was a big auditorium and a lot of room for chairs for the audience to sit while there were speakers who gave various points on what was on sale there and possibilities for future development and overseas sales and all that, the whole business. So the boy was awed by it, of course. It was an enormous auditorium with 300 or 400 people of all kinds there, businessmen. There's a back gallery for the public to sit in and take it in. And there were many reporters, men and women, wandering around with their press cards and their pencils and papers and their microphones, interviewing people. Big convention. So the boy sat all by himself, watching the whole thing for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, as his father took part in the proceedings, introduced a few speakers, was interviewed himself. The boy sat there and heard all these hundreds of people, and he did indeed saw a lot of famous people that he did indeed see on the television news. There was a congressman or two, and there's important law officials who were interested in law equipment for catching criminals scientifically. And he was very much impressed to see in person all these people that he had seen on television. So he sat there in awe for 2 or 3 hours, and finally it became noon, and his father came over and said, lunchtime, son, let's go. I know a nice little place down there. Let's go have lunch. So he was ready for it too. So they went down to the cafe and got in a little corner booth, and the father ordered, and the boy ordered. There is something about this whole room, all these activities that you don't understand. And I don't want to tell you what it is. I prefer that you see it for yourself. It has to be a self-revelation, self-discovery. So the boy did, of course, know what his father was talking about. He thought of several possibilities. He thought perhaps his father meant that he, the father, owned the whole thing and he was going to pass it on to his son. See, the boy being 18 always personalizes, always thinking, what is there for me in the remark my father made? But he couldn't come to any definite conclusion. He just didn't know. So lunch proceeded, and they enjoyed themselves, and about 1 or 1:30 they wandered on back, and the afternoon session began. But before his father left, he said, son, now I want you to watch very carefully and try to see something that you don't see now. And if you do see it, come up, tell me. I'm available. Come up, talk to me anytime. Tell me that you see something that might even be shocking to you. So the son said, fine. The father went one way, and the boy went back to his chair and sat and watched the afternoon proceedings, far more baffled than enlightened. But he soon was overwhelmed again by the excitement of it all, and he wandered around seeing all this marvelous scientific equipment with all its flashing lights and buzzing wheels. Afternoon wore on, and the father came over about 3 or 4, and he said, well, did you see something different or unusual? And the boy confessed that he had not. So the father said, okay, I'll tell you. So they got over 2 chairs over in a corner, which was facing the whole hall. And the father said, now, before I tell you, I want you to look around. See those important people up on the platform there? Many of them sitting in back of the speaker, and the speaker himself, who you know is a very famous man. See all the important women wandering around there, wives of famous and important executives. See the newspaper reporters. See the public back there in the gallery up there, the balcony. Son said, yes. Father said, now, listen to what I'm going to tell you and watch what happens to you, to your mind when I tell you this. And the boy was baffled, and the father said, son, every single human being in this building except you and me are robots. No exceptions. See that man standing up? You see, your father has been in the business of scientific equipment for all these years, and we have perfected these robots so they look exactly like human beings. That really isn't the senator up there. We studied the real senator, and we made a robot with his face, his expressions, his gestures. You thought it was him, did you? You were deceived. That isn't him at all. See that famous lady reporter that you see on the 6 o'clock news? That's a machine. Believe me, son, that's a machine. I know how much this is for you to take, but take my word for it. Every person you see, if you could see inside them, you see gears and wheels, mechanical forces, which is activated by a powerhouse, a power room we have back there. And if we shut off the switch, every one of them would collapse and fall limp to the floor. We could do that if we wanted to. In fact, we have done it experimentally. We shut off the power and they collapse. We're not going to do it now because we're performing a certain experiment. The boy couldn't believe it, and the father, he was sensible enough to know how much this was for him to take. You can't take it when I tell you that everyone you see is a robot. You don't see it. Never mind that boy. I am telling you, everyone out in that world is exactly what was in that hall, a robot. You don't see it. And you'd better, or you're going to continue to be unsafe, and you're going to talk to them as if they are intelligent spiritual beings. You're talking to a machine. How do you expect it to reply except as a machine? With its repetitious memories and habits. Father said, okay, come over, son, to the next building, which we also own. Next door is another huge building. And the father said, I'm going to leave you to go inside there. I have to go back to work inside the robot building. And I want you to just go in there, and I think you'll be convinced. And the boy's getting a little scared. You can understand, right? So the father went away, and the boy went up to the door of this new building next to the robot building, the hall, the assembly hall. And he was a little afraid as his hand reached out to take the knob to open the door, to go inside. But he did it. He pulled on the door, stepped inside, and looked around. And here's what he saw. He saw hundreds of robots who looked like human beings draped over the tables, lying all sprawled all over the floor. No action, no life at all, simply because they were still being completed. He could see that certain parts were missing, and he understood what those other robots were like, because here they were, the others were in the process of being completed. And they hadn't had on the outer clothes yet to cover up the wheels and the gears. The boy walked back to the hall, and he looked inside again. Then he walked back to the second hall, and he saw the lifeless figures there sprawled out. He went back and forth several times. And as he did so, the shock began to fade, and understanding began to take its place. He saw what that seemingly real world was really like, what was actually going on. Obviously, this is what you're going to have to do, to understand that what I said, the story that I told you, is a parallel, but a fact. If you could see inside those famous people, those important people, those confident people, if you could see it all at once, you would collapse on the floor. You'd get up again, but you wouldn't be able to take it. Now, remember the point we had earlier, that you have to see it in yourself first before you can see it in other people. I tell you, I know what's happening here right now. And those of you listening to this cassette tape somewhere else, I know what's happening. You are hearing, but you are not understanding. You are not seeing, because you have not gone through the process of seeing that you yourself, inside yourself, are simply a set of gears and wheels and squeaks. You simply don't see yourself as the machine that you are. So, what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you one thing you can start to do. You can start about 1,000 different places, fortunately. But one place you can start is where you still attribute power, wisdom, authority to anyone outside of yourself. You see, because you yourself are cut off from truth, from spiritual energy, you are cut off from that. The only thing you can do is to depend upon human power and hope that that is real. You don't know spiritual power. You're not connected with God at all. Not being connected with God and with His energy, you must therefore hope that that man out there might have authority to tell you what to do. That official, that man, you ladies might depend on a man, hoping that he might be wise enough to help you find yourself. Maybe he's strong. Forget it! Forget it with every single human being on earth, and I mean everyone. The extremely rare exceptions of human beings who are living with the Spirit of God. They're included too, because you're not required to follow their human personality. And besides, how would you recognize him when you don't have truth in yourself to recognize whether he's telling you the truth or not? So the first thing you have to do is have the courage to refuse to believe in those robots. Why don't you get it over with? Go through the shock. Say, I am already miserable. What have I got to lose? I'm already miserable. Why don't I just see, how's this for a true statement? I'm already lost. Let's see how much more lost I can get. Maybe that increased sense of being desolate will produce the shock I need to face the facts about both myself and the world. Now you listen to me. Goodness, health, strength comes to you as you defy your own fears and say, I am going to go right into the depths of my own self-deception, my own robot nature. I am going to go right in the depths of that, no matter, and you're holding your hands like this, no matter how terrified I am to do that. Because you understand and you know thoroughly. You know it now. Don't turn away from what you know. You know absolutely that nothing else is going to get rid of the agony. Haven't you tried everything else? Look at everything you've tried. Look what you're trying right now. Right while I'm talking, you're trying a little tricks. Your old nature is, I know that. And the devil knows it too. And that's why he's gleeful. By the way, the devil has no laughs here. He scowls. And he gets afraid. See? The devil is fear. Now, if you are afraid, then you are also the devil. Yes! Ignorance is the devil which has fear. So if there's a part of you that says, I'm going to understand what's going on instead of evading it, The great moment will come when the light from truth, which you have invited, will put the whole spotlight on you so you see what's happening. It's the same thing as happened when that young man went into the hall next door, and which was a great shock to him. Right in front of his eyes, because he has the courage to put his hand on that knob and open the door, right in front of his eyes was the facts about horrible human nature. And let me tell you something else that happened to him once he understood, after he went back and forth a few times. He went back into that hall after he understood, and he sat in that same chair, and he looked up at all those robots whom he knew to be robots, and listened to this. He no longer worshiped them. He was no longer in awe of that great political figure with all the titles on television every night. He no longer attributed power to them. Therefore, and listen to this, therefore he was no longer afraid of them. Therefore, there was no longer any fear in him. Understanding of the complete human condition makes all fear vanish. Look how simple it is then. Understanding, self-understanding, leads to truth understanding. You start with yourself. You see what's wrong. That leads to a higher understanding of what can be right. And what can be right is simply the absence of everything that is wrong. The procedures for discovering freedom within have been presented to you. Now you have to go to work. And oh, what a pleasure. A number of you have recently asked questions and made comments on the subject of people coming to a source of truth and then leaving it. Now, that can be broken down into several categories. A man or woman who comes to a class like this, stays a while, and then departs physically. It can be a person who comes to a truth class and stays physically but departs psychologically and spiritually. It can be someone who has no contact whatever ever with a source of truth like this, but goes down to the office every day, or travels on the bus, or mingles with other people, and he hears mechanical announcements about truth, but he goes away. So you see, what we're going to talk about tonight is a very broad subject about human beings who in one way or another hear what is right but don't hear it. They hear the words, but their hearts are hard and their spirits are unwilling to go any further than the physical reception of it. However, more specifically now tonight, I want to explain to you, for your benefit, and you apply all of this to yourself and your own internal journey, I want to explain to you exactly what happens specifically when a man or a woman comes to an authentic place where truth is told, and told beautifully, told purely, told constantly, and finally decides that he or she doesn't want it. And I'll say he, but of course it applies to a woman equally. Now, these steps that I'm going to describe to you, I want you to know that they are always unseen by the individual involved. If he or she could see them, they wouldn't happen. all tragedy, all hardness of heart, all getting mad, all saying, I want my way, all of that is an unconscious statement inside the individual. He can't see it, and he doesn't know that he can't see it. Now you try to explain to him, sir, I'm explaining something to you. I'm telling you that you don't want to hear truth. What does that mean to him? Nothing at all. You're talking to the wall. There's nothing in him that has any wish to be different from what he is. So remember, as I go through this now, that the individual knows not what he is doing. He has no consciousness of himself in relation to the events that happen, which is why they happen. He has no wish to understand them because he is like, remember the other night I described a man who was dazed and swaying next to a cliff? And he saw the cliff right next to him, and it produced a jolt in him. And look at the sad thing that happened. He fell in love with the sensational jolt of seeing that he was in danger, which means that he was saying, I am in danger. How exciting, how exhilarating to feel this way. And this connects with another subject we talked about one time, which is being in love with hell. Now, when you begin to work on yourself and continue with it, you will more and more come to the realization, as that swaying man did, that you are in danger, but only because you're unconscious of it. And everything depends in each individual life what happens to you at the moment that you begin to see that you're next to the cliff. That is, to begin to see that you have no control of your life. Everything happens depends on what happens to your reaction when you see this. Because if you want to go into hysteria and fear, which almost everyone does, you are going to go off over that cliff because you have refused to see the danger. If you'd really see it and say, look, there's something seriously wrong with my position. Yes, indeed, I am an egotist who's only interested in college degrees, in bullying someone, in getting all the money I can get from people. Yes, there's something wrong with me. That is seeing the danger, right? Very few are going to do that. So now, at this present point, we have a person, a man or a woman, who comes to a truth class, or in another way can stay home and read books. And at a certain point, because he has not understood that he is in danger, and has not understood that safety is in the light alone, he decides to give up. Now, when a human being decides to leave a group like this, man or woman, I want to describe to you his state. It is one of absolute delight. He has never been, in his own eyes, happier. Now, listen to this. You'll see why. Look, I'm talking to you. When you resist truth, when you go away even for 5 minutes, it happens to you, what I'm going to tell you about. He is in great delight. Why? Look, he comes to a class for months or years and goes away. What's the source of his pleasure and his joy and his exhilaration? School's out. He's like a little schoolboy who suddenly realizes that it's the last day of school. And he connects it this way. No more lessons. No more having to obey anything. No more associating maybe with people that I don't even like, those other kids in school. And he begins to think of all the things he can do in his new freedom. I can go where I want, and I can do what I want to do. I don't have to feel oppressed anymore. I don't have to pretend that I'm interested in the lessons. School's out, I can walk away and be on my own. This is his egotistical, false declaration of independence. And the pleasure is caused by a very intense vibration of his ego self. Look at what an individual I am. All those other people are staying there where I used to be. I am the one who is different. I am unique. They are there. I am here. Out of that whole group of 100 or 10,000 people or whatever, out of that whole group, look at me, I am unique. And now he starts to lie. Now the lies come in, and which are a part of his pleasure. I'm not a sheep anymore like those people are. I do what I want to do, and on and on. In other words, to repeat it again, school is out for him. No more burdens, no more problems, no more studying, no more feeling. Get this one. No, that I might be defeated, that I might lose, that I might not grasp what I had aimed to grasp. I don't have the feeling to be defeated anymore because I'm not aiming at anything. What a nice way to feel, he says to himself. Now, all this is a very carefully staged, rehearsed, and repeated stage performance inside the theater of his own mind. This is where he is spending all his time, putting on a performance that he has to keep going 24 hours a day, lest he see through himself and become terrified at what he's done. So for a period of time, could be weeks, could be months, it could even be years, the individual who has had a taste of truth, but has said, I don't like what I'm tasting, I want some other diet, for a long time he feels elated. And then, by a certain law, internal law, the feelings of exhilaration, of excitement, of being independent, of being apart from other people, that feeling by law begins to fade out. And he can't help it. There's nothing he can do about it, and nothing he can do about anything, because he's under the control only of his own old egotistical nature, and that's the only control there is, which is disastrous control. And so the pleasure that he feels begins to fade out. And he doesn't understand the following point. The reason he felt a certain amount of authentic safety when he was in the truth class is because that is where safety is. See, he didn't understand that the atmosphere that was coming down, he didn't understand that that was what was filling the room and made him feel a certain little bit of security. He thought, he actually believed, as all egotists do, that the security and solid feeling was in himself, which is called spiritual theft. See? Egotism always steals, attributes everything, virtues included, to itself. And so he doesn't understand why that even that faint feeling of security that he has was when he was with the truth group has disappeared, and now he's beginning to get scared. Now I want to tell you what happens at this point. I want you to know that there is such a thing as a devil, which I'll explain very briefly and then go on, which is self-created by each individual. You create yours. That's all. You've got yours. If you would cease to create him, you would have no devil in your life. But the devil within a person who has betrayed truth, which it is when you leave it, a person's devil inside of him begins to assault him as furiously as possible. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But all the dark forces that were lying down and resting and taking it easy because there's no reason for them to work hard because they had the man where they wanted him, all these dark forces know what is happening. And so they assault him left and right, put as much confusion in as possible so there's no chance for him to ever catch a glimpse of his position next to the cliff. So he gets confused by it and careless and will eventually fall over. They don't want him to see where he is and then call on God to say, rescue me from what I have so briefly seen. Endless. Think of the most fierce, dreadful, heinous emotions that you have had, and that is what the devil lets loose on the individual at this point, where he begins to doubt. I wonder if I did the right thing. Now he has to work hard to keep the theater going, to put on the stage performance. Of course I did the right thing. Didn't I feel good when I left? And on and on. Now, after a period of doubt for a long time, he comes to the third stage, the first being delight, the second doubt, and the third one is the critical one of all. There's still hope for that lost human being who's the prodigal son, who's wandered away from his father's house and went out into the wilderness and wasted his substance. There's still hope for him because the final decision is still in front of him. When you're still in a stage where your doubt is active, even when the devil's attacking you, while you're still doubtful, there's still a chance for you to make the right decision. So here's our man approaching the point where he really has to decide who he is going to go along with. Whether he's going to go along with his egotism, with his hatred, with his violence, with his self-deception, which is the easy thing to do, or whether he's going to do the horrible thing to do, consciously, deliberately, intentionally, which is to say, look how foolish I've been. I've wasted my life out in the wilderness, and I'll go back to my father's house and ask him for forgiveness to take me back. There's his two choices, right? It's very difficult to come back because that has to be. Then you'll have to admit that you were an egotist, that you were wrong, that you were taken over, that you were lying to yourself, that you're an unpleasant human being. Is it necessary to tell you that most people make the decision to continue to go downhill, to follow themselves, and so they begin to descend? Once in a while, someone will come to himself, as did the prodigal son in the New Testament story, will come to himself and see where he's been and what he's been doing. And at that point, he invites God to show him what he has truly loved. And when he sees what he has truly loved, he is so horrified that he makes a decision in favor of coming back to his father's house, to the truth class. What he has seen is his love for everything that is destroying him. He finally understands that all this hidden violence and all this sneering, he finally understands that not only is poison, but it is poison that is working on him. He sees it. He understands. And he comes back. Now, that's the rare man or the rare woman, because so much is required. You know what's required, don't you? Giving up your whole false life. Beginning to give it up Everything that has been valuable to you, including your hysterical scream of saying, look at that cliff over there. Am I going over the cliff? I may fall over it. Give that up. If you like that, you are it, and you are over the cliff. Did you understand what giving up your life means? It means giving up everything that's insane. It means giving up everything that is destroying you. You think you're sacrificing something. Look what nobody understands. What you're giving up is your death. You're giving up death in order to find eternal security. But that's another story too, isn't it? So the individual, in this case, the one we're talking about, decides not to go back. He makes his decision. He has decided what he wants to love for the rest of his physical life here on earth. And so his final stage is destruction. His final stage is to do the only thing that it is possible for a machine to do, which is to ramble around and eventually wreck itself. In the case of Judas, who betrayed Christ and was paid the 30 pieces of silver, that was his thrill, that was his reward. In the case of Judas, he went out and hanged himself, we're told. Now, every human being who leaves the truth after hearing it for 5 minutes or for 20 years and leaves internally or externally goes out and hangs himself. Psychologically, that means the pain becomes so bad that you no longer want to investigate it, but you want to block it out. You understand what self-suicide is? The world, look out there, you'll see people walking around who have committed self-suicide and nobody knows it. The last person to know it is the person themselves. They never see themselves how they walk down the street. They don't see how they can't be open to anything outside of the horror show inside their mind. Self-suicide. Let me tell you, you had better be grateful, and you will be grateful for eternity if you accept it. You'd better be grateful for what you're being told here so that you could begin to catch yourself making a mistake somewhere along the line. And at the moment you are horrified at what you see, you shake your head. And instead of looking with fascination at that horrible cliff miles down, that horrible cliff, here it is, and here you are 5 yards away from it, ready to spill and tumble over it. Instead of being fascinated by the cliff, you say, no, I am not going to be in love with what has been destroying me all my life, and which seeks for me to make a final decision to jump off. No! And your no, that's a prayer. And I'll tell you what God will do. This will even happen physically. I know it does, and you'll know it does. When you no longer take pleasure in self-destruction, in screaming, my God, what's happening to me? When you no longer take pleasure in exclamations and simply say, no, that is not for me, that is a prayer. Truth, God, reality will hear that and will send down a bit of energy so that when you're here, tempted to look down at yourself, which is destruction, you're looking at yourself. Where do you think the destruction is? I'm not talking about a physical cliff. I'm talking about a psychological state that is inside of you. and you look over and you see it, and you know how badly you want to look over, and you know if you look over one more time you will jump. You know that, and you scream no. What do you think God is for? Why do you think he exists? What do you think he's doing up there? He's looking down for that rare human being who will be in this position and say no, so that he can have contact, communication. The no is contact with truth, with heaven. And God sends down a little bit of elementary energy, because that's all you can take. You're 99 and 9/10 block to it. But that no made this small opening, and the energy comes down. And even physically, to keep the illustration going a little bit, physically, you know, you're tempted to go off the cliff, to look at it and be hypnotized by it and go off it. You say no, the energy comes into your physical body, into your heart, into your spirit, into your mind. The energy comes down, and it turns your head over this way, and you look and you see the beautiful fields out there in the meadow, which represents life, which represents eternal security. You look over and you're fascinated by that. And the longer you look, the more clear it becomes what has happened to you, what's been happening to you. This experience has happened to you 100 times, 1,000 times a year. But now you understand it, because you can see the contrast. You can see the hell over there, the cliff over there. And you can now understand it because you see the opposite of it, the contrast of it, which is the beautiful place that you can head toward. For the first time, you felt the thrill and the beauty and the strength of something coming from outside of you, taking you over, possessing you, turning your head over there, and there it was. You see, you were possessed all the other time by the dark forces, weren't you? Now you understand you can be possessed by something else. And so this is a rare individual, someone who is in that position, and he decides to say no, and so he is saved. This is real salvation. But back to the person who looks and is fascinated by his own wrongness, by his own evil, looks and jumps. Jumps into himself. What else? See, you're giving an opportunity to turn away from what has been dragging you over there, that malicious magnet that has been pulling you over toward the cliff. You've given an opportunity to be attracted by something else. So it's your response that counts, doesn't it? This process has been explained to you. In every instance of every man or woman in this hall, or listening to this talk on a cassette tape, every man or woman has an individual responsibility, your responsibility to understand what is being said and see how perfectly it applies to you. Because you are in danger unless you understand your danger. You can see the tendency to want to stay where it's safe because you understand, and you say to yourself, I've got it now. I'm going to stay here because this is where I belong. And let me tell you that this is not your old nature saying that, but your new nature that is indeed in contact with truth. This is where I belong. This is where I know I'm safe. That is what you can have.